Because of the following CBS News special report, the Merv Griffin Show will begin at 12 o'clock, 11 Central Time tonight.
Some 300 persons and 3 expensive airliners of 3 nations are waiting now on a desert airstrip in Jordan, waiting for the world's diplomats to find the answer to a Middle East crisis of frightening dimensions, waiting in the sweltering heat of a metal aircraft under a broiling sun, hostages of the 20th century equivalent of the Barbary pirates.
We simply can't tolerate the situation. You can't go on endlessly like this. We've been so fortunate in not having complete disasters. The one where the aircraft was blown up in the air, but there could have been any number of other ones. We just, from a technical, from a pilot's viewpoint, we just figure that sooner or later there's going to be, if this continues, there's going to be worse disasters.
Don't you feel that your own policy of violence is moving you into a dead end from which you will not be able to escape and move to a policy of peaceful accommodation?
What do we have to lose, Mr. Hottelet? All we have left as Palestinians is the better tent that has been given to us by countries which give our adversary, our enemy, the phantoms and the napalm to burn the tent and to burn our people.
Good evening. Just a few hours ago, the deadline set by the guerrillas for the release of their terrorist comrades expired. But instead of blowing up their captive planes and passengers, they announced an indefinite extension of their ultimatum. However, there is still great concern tonight about the fate of some 300 passengers and crew aboard those 3 hijacked planes.
This is a CBS News special report, The Hijack Conspiracy, with CBS News correspondent Walter Cronkite, sponsored by
Western Electric, the people who make Bell telephones, and the communications equipment of the future.
Well, here is the situation as of this moment. There now are 3 jetliners, a TWA, a Swiss airliner, a British overseas plane on that airstrip in the Jordanian desert 30 miles from Amman. Arab guerrillas hold as captives some 300 nationals from the United States, Britain, West Germany, Switzerland, Israel, even now from some Arab lands. But the guerrillas have extended the deadline for the expiration of their ultimatum for the release of their fellow terrorists, giving the International Red Cross an opportunity to negotiate for the release of the plane's hostages. Washington has been a major center of activity of these efforts, and we have a report on developments there from Dan Rather.
The situation is fragile, but not desperate. That, in summary, appears to be the White House view. Hope has been rekindled by the fact that the terrorists let their deadline tonight pass and no new deadline has been set. What induced the kidnappers not to make good on their deadline threat, no one here is willing to discuss. Since mid-afternoon, however, there has been much talk in upper reaches of the Nixon administration about giving in to any reasonable guerrilla demands that would free the hostages. The president spent much of the early part of the day reviewing all alternatives. These included military options, and some contingency military plans were made. Mr. Nixon was told, however, that there were few, if any, military options that didn't run high risk to the lives of hostages. The Central Intelligence Agency emphasized that the terrorists are desperate, determined fanatics, willing to destroy themselves and hostages if panicked by anything at all. With this in mind, the president, through intermediaries, consulted with the British about releasing the Palestinian woman skyjacker held in London. 6 C-130 prop jet transport planes were moved into Turkey on a strictly standby basis for possible use in evacuation if a deal could be arranged. Elements of the U.S. 6th Fleet in the Mediterranean were moved closer to Jordan. The U.S. Army's 8th Infantry Division in Germany, which includes 2 paratroop battalions, was reported by some sources to be on tentative alert. This was not officially confirmed. No U.S. military involvement, other than possible evacuation operations, seems to be seriously contemplated unless, as one source said, there is some disaster out there in the desert. Dan Rather, CBS News, the White House.
Part of your telephone will fill this whole room. It's called a telephone central office, and the men who put it together for your Bell Telephone Company are Western Electric installers. It has hundreds of thousands of parts, but it's as much a part of your telephone as your dial. It's the part that searches out, finds, and connects you with the number you're dialing, usually in seconds. It's one of the most complex machines ever developed. Putting it together is one of the most complex jobs in the Bell system. And the highly skilled, carefully trained installers who do the job test and retest every step of the way to make sure that each step has been done properly, that every one of the millions of connections is exactly right. Western Electric, we make Bell telephone equipment, the big part you don't see, and the small part you do see every day.
Palestinian guerrillas, in a bold, coordinated action, created this newest crisis Sunday. And in so doing, they accomplished what they set out to do. They thrust back into the world's attention a problem diplomats have tended to shunt aside in hesitant steps toward Middle East peace, yet a problem demanding solution if there is to be peace. The problem of the Arabs, displaced by the creation of the State of Israel 22 years ago, a creation in which the United States was instrumental. While the world worried about the shaky ceasefire between Israel and Egypt and Jordan, guerrilla hijack teams struck 4 airlines almost simultaneously. 3 attacks succeeded. But Israeli security forces and crew members overwhelmed the team aboard an El Al flight, killing an Arab man and capturing his female companion, a veteran hijacker. The successful teams forced 2 planes, Swiss Air and Transworld Airlines, to an airstrip which had been carved into the desert near Amman, Jordan, where they were joined today by that British plane. There they wait tonight, ringed by guerrilla tanks and armor, and in turn, ringed by Jordanian army forces, each fearful of the first move. The 4th attack Sunday involved a Pan-American 747 jumbo jet. The hijackers took it first to Beirut and then to Cairo. Even before it landed, they ignited the fuse to explosives placed throughout the plane. Passengers and crew members had only minutes to scramble free before the $23 million aircraft went up in flames. The Pan Am passengers went free, but the Swiss Air and TWA passengers went to the desert, innocent human pawns in an international power struggle. The guerrillas checked passports and religion and let some 125 go on to Amman. But the remaining 190 became hostages for 7 Arabs held by Switzerland, West Germany, and Britain. The hostages have been allowed limited movement, a chance to talk with the Red Cross, and access to a doctor. Food has been adequate, sanitation inadequate, and the sun has been broiling on the metal skin of those jets. Then the guerrilla hijackers struck again. The British Overseas Airways Corporation jet with 113 persons aboard, taken over the Persian Gulf and ordered to Beirut, where these photographs were taken. It too then was flown to that Jordanian desert strip called Dawson Field. There's a report tonight that the guerrillas now have provided their captives with portable air conditioning units and 4 crates of whiskey. That would help. Through all this, a key figure is one Andre Rochat. As Marvin Kalb reports, what happens now in great part rests with the diplomatic skill of this quiet, unassuming Swiss official. Rochat is the principal negotiator sent by the International Red Cross to deal with the guerrillas in Jordan. He knows the key commandos. He's dealt with them before in other hijackings. It was Rochat who procured the deadline delay, and now in a few hours, he's to meet with the guerrillas to discuss release of the hostages. Kalb understands that one problem is the absence of guerrilla leader George Habash. He's in North Korea. The other major problem is Israel. The guerrillas apparently will ask for release of thousands of their Palestinian prisoners. The Israelis up to now have insisted they will not negotiate with what they consider bandit criminals. But Kalb says there are indications that under pressure from Washington, they may yield on this point. The hijackings have triggered a shockwave of indignation and concern throughout the world. Even Nasser's Egypt has denounced the air piracy, charging that it will lose whatever support there is for the cause of the Palestinian refugees. But the Arab commandos say they're not concerned about world opinion, that their hijackings are a legitimate instrument of war against the Israelis. One of their spokesmen in the United States discussed his view of the situation with our UN correspondent, Richard C. Hoplet.
Mr. Hassan, what is the purpose of these hijackings?
Well, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, which was responsible for this hijacking, feels that these instrumentalities of the Palestinian revolution are capable of directing world public opinion to the tragedy that befell the people of Palestine ever since the creation of the State of Israel and the eviction of those people from their homes and homeland. 2, I believe that they feel that this was also the answer of the Palestinian people to the big power attempt to impose a solution with regard to the question of Palestine, which is unacceptable to the people of Palestine and then to which the people of Palestine were not consulted. And this is their answer to it.
But a great deal of world opinion has really turned against you and is labeling Palestinians now as terrorists. Even Egypt, which certainly has not sought to appease Israel and has carried on its struggle, has turned against you and has condemned or at least disapproved of these
public opinion was party to the tragedy that was forced upon the people of Palestine when 23 years ago the United Nations succumbed to the pressure of the government of the United States when it decided to partition Palestine and to create the State of Israel. That resulted in the creation of the atmosphere, of the climate, which is conducive for Palestinian young men and women who were either ejected when they were children or who were born in their tents and their refugee camps to become desperate, to become commandos, to become aware that the world understands only one language, and namely that of force.
If you watch carefully and listen, the body will tell you how much effort it takes to perform a job. This is part of a new science at Western Electric called biomechanics, the science of man and machines. The people of Western Electric, in cooperation with Texas Tech and the University of Michigan, have pioneered studies in biomechanics. We believe it's better to change jobs to fit people than people to fit jobs. So, we're redesigning chairs, workbenches, and assembly lines we use to make equipment for the Bell telephone network. We've even listened to an arm talk and tell us how a basic hand tool can be changed to make people more comfortable at their work. Western Electric. We make Bell telephones with people and machines that are made for each other.
At the United Nations, the 15-nation Security Council met at the urgent request of the United States and Britain, and it appealed to the guerrillas to release all their hostages. Here again is Richard C. Hotley.
The action this afternoon was mostly behind the scenes. For 3 hours, key members argued in the President's office over what the appeal should say and how to say it quickly. The solution was to permit no debate. This set the stage for the President, Ambassador Davidson Nicol of Sierra Leone, to address the Council.
I know that important principles are involved which cannot be solved in a day's debate. But I know that I speak for many when I appeal to those concerned to spare the lives of innocent men, women, and children not involved in a state of war and who are traveling in the peaceful pursuit of their private lives and existence. We do not intend to solve the problems of this area of the Middle East this afternoon. We recognize that there have been many past wrongs in this area. We are all anxious that they should be corrected. We would like to appeal that more immediately today, those passengers and crews, and when I say passengers, I mean all passengers on board aircraft who have purchased tickets and are in the aeroplanes, who have been held as a result of hijackings or interference during international traveling, should be released and allowed to go free and unharmed.
The Security Council's appeal was then adopted within minutes by consensus without even a formal vote. All the kinks had been ironed out in advance. The idea was to forestall a debate in which Algeria would have opened the whole Pandora's box of the Middle East problem. Algeria's Mohammed Yazid was here as the spokesman of the Palestine Arabs to state their case. His speech would have drawn an immediate response from Israel's Joseph Tekoa, and the exchange, it was felt, would not speed the release of the people on the plains or improve the chances of the peace talks which are still in suspense here. Now the question is whether the appeal will be effective. The wording was changed in those 3 hours to cover the release of hijackers as well as hostages, and thereby to help the work of the International Red Cross, which is the only agency dealing directly with the Palestine guerrillas. The Security Council feels it has put into words world public opinion, all it could do. Now it has adjourned and hopes that its effort will help. Richard C. Hottle at CBS News, United Nations.
Correspondent Hoddlet asked the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations about his reaction to that Security Council move.
Mr. Ambassador, is Israel satisfied with this appeal?
We believe that the resolution adopted by the Security Council today could have been stronger, yet it does contain a clear, unequivocal call for the immediate release of all the passengers and crews that are being detained as a result of the hijackings. It is to be hoped, therefore, that this call would be heeded.
You say they should have been stronger, these appeals? In what way?
They could have condemned these acts, terror warfare conducted by the Arab terror organizations against Israel for a number of years. They could have also called specifically upon the Arab governments to prevent hijackings, not to cooperate with hijacking acts, and to see to it that when hijackings do occur, the passengers and crews detained are released immediately.
What effect is it likely to have on the actual situation?
Well, it all depends whether or not this call of the Security Council, representing the conscience of the world in a way, would be heeded by the hijackers. I hope that it would be, and that this would attenuate the tension that has built up over the last few days as a result of these crimes. If the call of the Security Council is not heeded, I fear that this would create a very dangerous situation in the Middle East.
Aerial piracy is not exactly a new phenomenon. The practice began in 1930, but for 37 years it was rare. A half a dozen incidents a year, and the number of passengers affected by the hijackings was small. Then came 1968, and the number soared to 30. 1969, and more than doubled to 70. And 1970 so far, 43. In all of commercial airline history, there have been 251 attempts. Of them, 188 succeeded and 63 failed. Most of the hijackers who succeeded went to Cuba, 122 of them. But 66 others chose other destinations, many of them Middle Eastern countries. Governments and commercial aviation have struggled to find an answer to the problem, and the Middle East hijackings have given new urgency to their efforts. David Shoemaker reports from Washington.
There's been a string of closed-door meetings here at the Federal Aviation Administration and elsewhere in Washington, with officials trying to develop new plans to frustrate hijackers. One big problem has been to find a way that won't immediately bog down in international relations. It's estimated by airline sources that there are about 2,500 flights around the world each day which could be considered fairly vulnerable to hijackings. Most officials agree that by extending the electronic metal detection system and other checks of boarding passengers, the domestic situation in the United States could be handled. Not all the gates are equipped with the detectors, however, and the airlines are being urged to share the electronic gear until they can be installed everywhere. Domestic hijackings already are down 2/3 compared to last year. International flights pose a more difficult problem, and in recent days, both the pilots and the airlines have come to the conclusion that there's no choice but to install armed guards. In the past, they felt the danger of a mid-air gun battle was too great, but now they say there's not really much chance that an airliner could be knocked out of the sky. CBS News reporter Tony Sargent talked with Transportation Secretary John Volpe about all this.
We have been looking at it for many months. There are those who say put armed guards on them. We may have to come to this, and we'll be discussing this again today. But the fact is that you and I know what could happen if there were armed guards. You could have a shootout in the plane and automatically kill all of the passengers on the plane. So it is a very complicated problem. It has been aggravated by the events of the last couple of days, and I think we'll just have to do something more than we've done to date.
What would you say are the chances of the armed guard solution to this problem being imposed, at least temporarily?
Well, if I were a betting man, and I'm not, I would say the chances are quite likely we may have to do it.
One source estimates the cost of armed guards for the so-called vulnerable flights at about $3 million a year. There's no agreement whether they would be government agents or private police. And, like new extradition agreements, armed guards would require international approval. The pilots are considering both boycotts and strikes to hurry negotiations. David Shoemaker, CBS News, Washington.
Whatever international solutions are reached, the airlines themselves already are tightening security. David Culhane reports from John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York.
Security measures have been stepped up at airports all across the United States. There's been no discernible drop in passenger traffic, but a few anxious souls have called up and demanded an ironclad guarantee that their flight will not be hijacked. Obviously, the airlines are in no position to give such a guarantee. But here at Kennedy Airport in New York and elsewhere in the United States, fairly strict security measures are in effect. This is the key electronic security device, the magnetometer. All passengers walk between these two metal poles before boarding their flight. If they have any gun or metal weapon or any metal object on their person, the magnetometer will detect it and alert officials. Not every flight is checked with the magnetometer, but this week it would be fair to say that it is used with most flights.
Now you.
And the passengers, even in European flights going near the Middle East, are pretty much taking the hijack potential in stride. Excuse me. Were you concerned at all about the possibility of a hijack with this flight?
I'm depending on TWA to take care of me.
Say again, pardon me? Say
I'm depending on TWA to take care of me.
How about you?
No, I wasn't concerned. You don't have a one time to die.
Excuse me. How about you? Were you concerned at all about the possibility of hijack?
No, not really. No.
Why not?
I guess I just travel so much that I don't think too much about those things happening.
Thank you. The security measures are causing some slow-ups, but these people are delighted to be delayed. If it means that you won't end up in the Jordan Desert, who cares about an extra 15 minutes? David Culhane, CBS News at Kennedy Airport, New York.
Governments, airlines, and passengers aren't the only ones worried about hijacking. The big insurance companies are running multi-million-dollar risks. That story from Morley Safer in London.
Lloyd's of London are among the biggest underwriters of aircraft insurance in the world. This week's epidemic, as they call it at Lloyd's, of aircraft hijacking has caused an extraordinary flurry of activity. In the underwriter's room, brokers clustered around the so-called casualty board that announces missing ships and planes, and just lately, hijacks. They were following the course of the BOAC VC-10 taken by Arab commandos this afternoon. The events of this week have forced the underwriters to re-examine their policies. I spoke to the chairman of Lloyd's Aircraft Underwriters, Owen Davis, on the left, and a former chairman, David Barham.
Is there hijack insurance as such?
Oh, yes, there is. And most of the major airlines of the world do insure for this particular eventuality.
We've now had 5 attempts and 4 successful hijacks in just the past few days. Are they forcing the insurance rates up generally for aircraft?
Oh, I can assure you that at Lloyd's at the moment there's an awful lot of people running around and looking at their books and seeing what rates they've got and what they think they should have as a result of this recent epidemic of hijackers.
Is there anything the insurance companies can do?
Well, I think that really the only thing that we can do is to either refuse to insure them, this is when they come up for renewal, of course, we're on risk now, or put the rates up so high that it becomes an uneconomical proposition for them to insure. Either way, I think that they're bound to have to bring this to a head, whether we put the rates up or whether we don't. This cannot go on, this situation, but that's about all we can do.
Tonight at an aviation meeting in Honolulu, the president of the International Air Transport Association said he had been advised that the insurance industry around the world has canceled policies with the airlines because of the hijackings. A statement made by Gerrit van der Waal, who's also president of the Dutch KLM airline, stunned those at the meeting. Contacted in the middle of the night in London about this, Lloyd's officials sleepily denied it has canceled any policies.
These are the people who make the things your phone calls are made of. The people of Western Electric, over 200,000 of us. Our job in the Bell system is to make telephones, intricate communications equipment, and millions of things that are needed to connect one phone with another in the world's largest telephone network, the Bell Telephone Network. The people of Western Electric. We make Bell telephones and other things to help you reach just about any place in the country.
Now here is Eric Severide in Washington for some thoughts on this frightening episode of air piracy.
This is one of those times when government leaders earn their pay. They have got to think their way out of this terrifying phenomenon of mass kidnappings by air. Whatever they try may go wrong, and they know that blame lands at jet speed. They are thinking the hard, short thoughts how to solve this immediate episode. Others are free for the long, long thoughts about what history may be trying to tell us as to man's capacity to survive the technology he has created. Adolf Hitler's chief architect, Albert Speer, had 20 years in Spandau prison to brood about this. Hitler was the first tyrant with modern technology at his command. This increased in geometric proportion his capacity to do evil. But there is another side to this coin. It is the capacity of the weak, the obscure, furtive shadows of individuals to do evil by slipping a grain of sand in technology's interdependent gears. One man with a pistol, toy or real, can divert a great aircraft and 100 human beings 1,000 miles off course. 10 adolescents can slip through dark alleys throwing Molotov cocktails and pulling fire alarms, tie up the fire and police forces of a great city, and produce a holocaust. A political romantic with a stick of dynamite can destroy years of precious research. A slight overload in a power grid can throw millions of homes into darkness. A strike by a one-vote margin can force millions to walk to work or stay home. We now live in and by the web of an enormously complicated, intensely interrelated technology, the whole no greater than its parts and its strongest parts at the mercy of its weakest links. This is a way of life that depends absolutely on order and continuity and predictability. But it happens that we have simultaneously reached a point of discontinuity in the political and social relations of men, where little is predictable and disorder spreads. The anarchic idea flourishes, and the techniques of the guerrilla fighter are widely adopted. Tyrants can do massive things with technology. Individual anarchists or guerrillas can do massive things to it, and thus to us all. The dilemma over the hijacked airplanes is an isolated clinical example of a vaster dilemma. No one sees certain remedy. Everyone senses that the search for remedy through laws, rules, police, prohibitions will be painful. When the need for safety expands, familiar freedoms can only shrivel. This is Eric Severide in Washington.
Dawn is just breaking over the Jordanian desert. Dawn of a fourth day for most of those hostages, the second day for the rest. It may be a day of decision for them, but as pawns in this desperate game, a decision so remote from their own hands. This is Walter Cronkite, CBS News. Good night.
This has been a CBS News special report, The Hijack Conspiracy, with CBS News correspondent Walter Cronkite, sponsored by
Western Electric, the people who make Bell telephones, and the communications equipment of the future.
This is CBS.